I never thought the footage from my tiny front porch camera would destroy my family. But that day, when my father's call pulled me from work at the hospital, it caught everything my stepmother never meant for anyone to see. It was a Tuesday morning, busy like always. The ER was packed, monitors beeping, phones ringing, and patients waiting for answers. I was finishing up a patient chart when my phone buzzed in my pocket. The caller ID showed the number of the hospital my father usually went to. My stomach tightened before I even answered. "Dr. Carrington?" The nurse's voice was shaky. "Your father's been brought in. He collapsed at home. You might want to come." I didn't wait to hear more. I told one of the residents to cover for me, grabbed my coat, and ran. My hands trembled as I tried to sign out at the desk, but the pen slipped. The walk to the parking lot felt endless. My thoughts kept circling the same terrible question. How bad is it this time? At home, everything was half finished. A cup of coffee sat cold on the counter. My apartment looked like a storm had passed through it. Notes scattered, laundry unfolded, my dog barking near the door as I hurried around. I couldn't think straight. I stuffed my phone in my pocket, snatched my keys, then realized I'd forgotten my purse. I left anyway. The small red light on my porch camera blinked as I pulled the door shut behind me. I didn't even notice. The drive to the hospital felt like hours. I hit every red light, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I kept picturing my father, pale and weak, lying in a hospital bed. He'd always been so strong, so stubborn about taking care of himself. But lately he'd looked tired. Maybe it was age. Maybe it was stress. I never imagined how much of that stress was because of her. When I arrived, I ran through the automatic doors and straight to the nurse's station. "Richard Carrington," I said, breathless. They pointed me to the cardiac unit. My heart pounded as I walked into his room. He was hooked up to monitors, his face pale and still. The sight almost stopped me in place. "Dad!" My voice cracked. His eyes fluttered open for a moment, weak but trying to smile. "Lena," he whispered. "Don't worry, sweetheart. Just a little dizzy spell." The nurse beside him gave me a quiet look that said it was more than that. I took his hand, feeling how cold it was. A few minutes later, I heard the clicking of heels behind me. Valerie, my stepmother, swept into the room in a cream coat, her lipstick perfect, her face full of worry that somehow looked practiced. "Oh, Lena," she said softly, like she'd been crying. I came as soon as I heard. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something in her eyes made my chest tighten. I didn't know it yet, but while I stood there praying for my father to recover, Valerie was already planning her next move. And my little front porch camera was recording every second of it. When I was 16, my whole world changed in one night. My mom, Diane, died in a car accident on her way home from work. I still remember the phone call, my father's voice shaking as he tried to explain what had happened. After that, the house felt empty. The laughter, the smell of her cooking, the music she played while cleaning, it all disappeared. My father tried to stay strong for me, but he was broken in ways he never talked about. For a long time, it was just the two of us. I studied hard, kept busy, and told myself I had to be tough for him. He worked long hours and came home tired, sometimes sitting in front of the TV in silence for hours. I thought we were healing together, but I didn't realize he was drifting further away. 2 years later, he met someone new. Her name was Valerie. She worked at a local real estate firm, always dressed neatly, her hair perfect, her voice calm and sweet. The first time I met her, she brought a pie to the house and called me sweetheart. I wanted to like her. My father looked happy again for the first time since Mom died, and I didn't want to take that away from him. But something about her always felt off. She was polite, too polite. Every word seemed practiced, every smile calculated. She never raised her voice, never showed anger, never seemed real. After they got married, small things started to change around the house. My mother's pictures slowly disappeared from the living room. The floral dishes Mom loved were replaced with plain white ones. Valerie said it made the house feel fresh. When I left for medical school, she hugged me tightly and whispered, "You're grown now, Lena. Your father has me to look after him." It sounded kind, but it didn't feel that way. From then on, every visit home felt more awkward. Valerie always found small ways to make me feel like an outsider. My old bedroom became her sewing room. My dad stopped calling as often. And when I did visit, Valerie always managed to keep him busy or tired. I noticed how she handled everything, his medication, his bank statements, his appointments. She said it was to help him, but it looked more like control. My father didn't seem to mind. He said she made life easier. I didn't argue, though deep down, I hated seeing how much power she had over him. As the years passed, we became more like polite strangers than a family. I buried myself in work, long shifts at the hospital, night shifts that blurred together. I told myself I was too busy for visits. Maybe I was avoiding seeing what I already knew. Valerie had slowly taken my mother's place, and my father let her. What I didn't know was that she wasn't just replacing my mother's presence. She was replacing her trust, her memory, and everything that was once meant to be mine. When I reached the hospital, the air felt heavy, filled with the sounds of machines and hurried footsteps. My father was in critical care, lying still on the hospital bed with wires and tubes attached to him. His skin looked pale, his chest rising and falling slowly under the oxygen mask. Seeing him like that made my chest tighten, but I didn't have time to freeze. Years of being a doctor had trained me to move fast, even when my heart was breaking. Valerie was already there. She was standing near the nurse's desk, crying loudly and waving her hands as if she didn't understand what was going on. Her voice carried across the hall. "Please, someone tell me what's happening to my husband," she said, her tone trembling but somehow practiced. One of the nurses tried to calm her down, assuring her that the doctors were doing everything they could. I walked straight to the attending physician and introduced myself. "I'm Dr. Lena Carrington," I said, showing my badge. "He's my father. Can I see his chart?" The doctor gave me a quick look of recognition and handed over the clipboard. I read through the notes, scanning his vitals and test results. His heart rhythm was unstable when he was brought in, but they'd managed to stabilize him. Still, his condition was serious. While I talked quietly with the medical team about his medications and the next steps, Valerie hovered close by, sniffing into a tissue and asking questions that didn't really matter. "Does the insurance cover this?" she asked one nurse. "Will he need to stay long?" "Because his policy." I turned and gave her a look before she finished. She froze for a second, then gave a weak smile and said, "I just worry about him, that's all." I went back to my father's bedside and touched his hand gently. It was cold but warm enough to give me hope. "Hey, Dad," I whispered, "you're okay. You're in good hands." His eyelids flickered, but he didn't speak. The monitor beside him beeped steadily. Valerie stepped closer, fixing her hair like she was about to pose for a picture. "He looks so fragile," she murmured. I told him to rest more, but you know how stubborn he can be. Her voice had that sweet tone again, the one that sounded more for the room than for him. I ignored her and focused on updating the nurses. I gave them instructions to monitor his oxygen levels and notify me if his blood pressure dropped again. Valerie just stood there, clutching her bag, eyes darting between me and the doctor's notes. When visiting hours ended, I told her I would stay for a while. She smiled softly. "You've been working all day. Let me help you, Lena. Why don't I go by your apartment and feed your dog? I know you left in a rush." I was too tired to argue. "Fine," I said. "The spare key's under the mat." She thanked me sweetly, squeezed my arm, and walked out of the room. I didn't think much of it then. All I cared about was my father breathing through that mask. But later, when I checked that little porch camera, I realized her visit to my apartment had nothing to do with kindness. After 3 long days at the hospital, my father's condition finally improved. The doctor said his heart was weak, but steady now. I could finally breathe a little easier. I packed up my things, thanked the nurses, and drove home in the late afternoon. The sun was low, painting the streets in orange light, but I felt nothing but exhaustion. I just wanted to feed my dog, take a shower, and sleep in my own bed. When I unlocked my apartment door, something felt off. The air was too still, too quiet. My dog ran up to me, tail wagging, but there was a strange nervous energy in him. His water bowl was empty, which was odd since Valerie had promised to come by and take care of him. I walked further inside, frowning. My mail was scattered on the floor like someone had dropped it in a hurry. A drawer in my desk was slightly open, and a few papers were sticking out. I thought maybe I had left things messy when I rushed out, but the more I looked around, the more it didn't make sense. My keys were exactly where I left them, but a few small items on my desk were moved. My mother's silver pen, the one I always kept in the same spot, was missing. My stomach tightened. I decided to check my security camera, mostly to reassure myself. It was a small porch camera connected to my phone. I opened the app and scrolled back through the footage. The first few clips showed the mail carrier, a neighbor walking by, nothing unusual. But then I froze. There was Valerie. The time stamp showed the day after I had rushed to the hospital. She walked up to my door wearing sunglasses and a cream-colored coat. She looked calm, even cheerful. In her hand was a large tote bag. She bent down, reached under the mat, and picked up my spare key. My heart began to race. The footage showed her unlocking my door and stepping inside like she lived there. A full hour passed before she came out again. The bag she carried looked heavier now, its shape different. She stopped on the porch, took out her phone, and spoke to someone. The audio was faint, but I could hear a few words. "She's at the hospital. She won't find out," she said, her voice smooth and confident. I replayed it again and again, hoping I was wrong, that there was some other explanation. But there wasn't. I knew that look on her face, the little satisfied smile she gave as she locked my door and walked away. I sat on the couch, my hands shaking, the video still playing on a loop. My mind raced through every possibility. What had she taken? Why had she been here? What else had she done while I was gone? I didn't have the answers yet, but deep down, I knew this wasn't just about my dog or my mail. Valerie had come to my house for a reason. And whatever it wasn't good. The next morning, I woke up early, unable to stop thinking about that video. Valerie's face kept flashing in my mind. The calm way she moved, the confidence in her voice. I tried to tell myself maybe she had just tidied up or picked up something harmless, but that lie didn't last long. I needed to know what she'd done. I started by checking my bedroom. The first thing I noticed was the jewelry box on my dresser. It was slightly open, and inside, a few pieces were missing. My mother's pearl earrings and a gold bracelet she used to wear every Sunday were gone. My chest tightened. Those weren't just things, they were pieces of her memory. I searched the drawers, the nightstand, even under the bed, but they were nowhere. Then I went to the closet and pulled out the small safe I kept hidden behind a stack of old blankets. I entered the code, opened it, and felt my stomach drop. The folder with my mother's estate documents was missing. The will, bank statements, and copies of the trust, everything related to her inheritance, were gone. Only a few unimportant papers were left behind. It was clear someone had taken them deliberately. I sat on the floor for a long time, staring at the empty space where those papers should have been. I wanted to scream, but instead, I forced myself to think. Valerie knew exactly what she was doing. She hadn't come to feed my dog. She'd come to take something valuable. I turned on my laptop and logged into my father's bank account. He had given me access years ago when he was setting up online payments. The numbers on the screen looked strange. I noticed several large transfers to an account I didn't recognize. Each one had Valerie's authorization attached. My hands began to shake as I clicked through them. The amounts were big, 5,000 here, 10,000 there, spread out over months. The most recent transfer had been made just 2 days before my father's collapse. I scrolled further back and found even older records. Valerie had been moving money for years, always small enough not to raise alarms, but together it added up to tens of thousands. The name on the receiving account matched a company I'd never heard of, but something about it felt fake. It hit me all at once. Valerie wasn't just taking my mother's jewelry or old documents. She'd been draining my mother's trust fund, money my father had promised to protect for me. She must have convinced him to merge accounts or reorganize finances, the same phrase she used whenever she wanted control. I felt sick. My mother had worked her whole life to make sure I'd be secure. Now it was all disappearing under the name of a woman who smiled at me like family. I wanted to run to the hospital, confront her, shout everything I'd found. But part of me knew I needed to stay calm. Valerie had planned this carefully, and if I made one wrong move, she'd find a way to twist it. So I took a deep breath, saved every record, and backed up the footage. My hands still trembled, but one thing was clear. This wasn't a mistake. It was theft, and she'd been doing it right under my father's nose. When I arrived at the hospital that evening, I could barely keep my hands from shaking. I had spent the whole day going over the footage and the stolen documents in my head. I knew what I had seen. I knew what she had done. Still, I needed to hear her admit it. I needed to look her in the eyes and see the truth for myself. My father was resting in his room, asleep. The doctor said he was stable but needed peace and calm. Valerie was sitting by his bed, flipping through a magazine, her face perfectly made up as always. When she saw me, she gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Lena, you're here early," she said softly, standing up. "He's doing much better today. You should be proud of the care you gave him." Her words made my stomach twist. I forced a small smile and said, "Can we talk outside? Just for a minute." She hesitated for a second, then nodded and followed me out into the quiet hallway. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee. I led her to a small waiting area where no one else was around. For a moment, we stood facing each other in silence. I checked my security camera. I said finally, "The day I left for the hospital." Her eyebrows lifted slightly, but she didn't say anything. "I saw you, Valerie. You used my spare key. You went inside my apartment. You took things that weren't yours." She blinked, keeping her expression calm. "Oh, Lena, you must be mistaken. I was only tidying up for you. You left in such a hurry, and I thought you'd appreciate me taking care of the place." I felt my throat tighten. "You were there for over an hour. You left with a full bag. You weren't cleaning, you were stealing." For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Fear, maybe, but it vanished quickly. She laughed quietly and said, "You must be under a lot of stress. Losing sleep, worrying about your father. It's easy to imagine things when you're tired." I took a deep breath. "I have the video. I can play it for you right now if you'd like." Her smile froze. The softness in her face disappeared. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "If you show him," she said, her tone suddenly sharp, "it'll kill him. Do you understand? His heart can't take that kind of shock. Are you really that heartless?" Her words hit hard, but not because they were true. They were a weapon, cold and deliberate. I stared at her, speechless for a moment. "You don't get to guilt me into silence," I finally said, my voice shaking. "You've been lying to him for years. You don't care about his health. You care about what happens when the truth comes out." She didn't reply. Her face was still, her eyes cold. I could see the anger building under her calm mask. I turned and walked away before she could say another word. My heart was pounding, but my mind was clear now. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't let fear stop me anymore. The next few days passed slowly. My father was getting better, but I could barely focus on anything except what Valerie had done. Every time I saw her walking down the hospital hallway, smiling politely at nurses, pretending to be the perfect wife, I felt my stomach turn. I knew what she was hiding behind that calm face. And this time, I wasn't going to let her get away with it. One night after my shift ended, I went home and turned on my laptop. I plugged in a small flash drive and copied every piece of evidence I had: the security camera footage, the screenshots of the bank transfers, and the photos of my empty jewelry box. I organized everything into folders, labeling them carefully. As I watched the progress bar fill, my heart pounded. It wasn't just anger now. It was determination. The next morning, I asked to speak with someone in the hospital's administration office. Dr. Patel, one of the senior physicians and a longtime mentor, agreed to meet me in his office. He was kind, with a calm voice that always made people feel safe. When I walked in, I told him everything about the camera footage, the missing jewelry, the stolen documents, and the suspicious bank activity. He listened quietly, leaning back in his chair, his hands folded. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "You've done the right thing by keeping evidence," he said. "But this isn't something you should handle alone. You'll need legal help." "I was thinking the same," I replied. "Do you know anyone I can trust?" He smiled faintly. "I'll connect you with an attorney I know, someone who deals with estate and inheritance cases. His name is Robert Ellison. He's good and he's discreet." By afternoon, I had an appointment with Mr. Ellison. He was direct but kind, the kind of man who didn't waste time. I laid everything out in front of him: the papers, the flash drive, the printed screenshots. He studied them carefully, asking questions and taking notes. "From what I can see," he said finally, "she's been accessing funds illegally. If your father's accounts were joint, she might have used that to move money without his full consent. Once we review the trust documents, we'll have enough to build a strong case." Hearing those words felt like a weight lifting off my chest. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had control again. We spent the next few hours putting everything in order. Mr. Ellison showed me how to organize the statements and mark each transfer date. When we finished, I had a neat, thick folder that told the whole story. As I left his office, I felt tired but sure of what I had to do next. I wasn't going to show the file to Valerie or confront her again. I was going to wait until my father was strong enough, until his heart could handle the truth. When that day came, I would sit him down, open the folder, and show him exactly who his wife really was. A week later, my father was finally discharged from the hospital. He looked weak, but happy to be going home. I could tell he was trying to put everything behind him, to focus on recovery. I, on the other hand, couldn't think about anything else except what I had to do next. The file with all the evidence sat in my bag, heavy as a stone. I had replayed that camera footage so many times that every detail was burned into my mind. When we got home, Valerie was all smiles. She helped him to the couch, fluffed his pillows, and spoke softly, as if she were the perfect, loving wife. She even thanked me for helping him recover, pretending nothing had ever happened. I played along. I smiled, I listened, and I waited for the right moment. A few days later, I called them both and invited them to my apartment for dinner. Just something quiet, I said, to celebrate Dad's recovery. Valerie sounded thrilled, maybe a little too much. "Oh, that's such a sweet idea, Lena," she said. "We'd love to come." I cooked a simple meal, chicken, vegetables, and a pie my father liked. I set the table neatly and made sure everything looked calm and ordinary. When they arrived, Valerie handed me a small plant as a gift and commented on how cute and cozy my place was. She walked around, pretending to admire the decor, probably checking if anything was missing. Dinner started off politely. Valerie asked about my work at the hospital and made small jokes about how I probably didn't even have time to eat or sleep. My father chuckled a few times, and for a moment, it almost felt normal. I could see how much he wanted peace between us. When we finished eating, I stood up and said, "There's something I want to show you both." My hands were steady even though my heart was racing. I walked over to my desk, opened my laptop, and clicked on the video file. The room went silent except for the faint hum of the computer. The screen showed Valerie unlocking my front door, walking inside, and then coming out an hour later with that same heavy bag. The audio was faint, but her words were clear enough. "She's at the hospital. She won't find out." My father didn't say a word. He just stared, his face pale, his hand trembling slightly on the table. Valerie turned toward me, her smile gone. "Lena, this is not what it looks like," she said quickly. "I was protecting some important family papers. Your father asked me to take care of things." I didn't reply. I reached into my bag, pulled out the folder, and placed it on the table. Inside were the printed bank statements, the transfers, and the missing document list. My father opened the folder slowly, his eyes scanning the pages. I saw the moment the truth hit him. His shoulders slumped, and the light in his eyes dimmed. Valerie reached for his hand, whispering something about misunderstanding, but he pulled away. The silence in the room felt heavier than any sound I'd ever heard. For a long moment after the video ended, no one spoke. The only sound in the room was the faint ticking of the wall clock. My father sat frozen, staring at the papers spread out before him. His face had gone pale, his breathing uneven. Valerie looked between us, her eyes darting like she was searching for the right lie to say next. Finally, my father's voice broke the silence. It was quiet but firm. "Is this true, Valerie?" he asked. "Did you really do this?" She shook her head quickly, forcing a tearful laugh. "Richard, of course not. This is all a mistake." Lena's confused. She's been under so much stress lately. She reached for his hand, but he pulled it away. His eyes filled with hurt and disbelief. "Don't lie to me," he said, louder now. "You went into her home. You took what wasn't yours. And these transfers, these are from my accounts." He pointed to the printed pages, his voice trembling. "How could you?" Her calm mask started to crack. "I did it for us," she said sharply. "You don't understand how much money she wastes. I was protecting what's left." I wanted to scream, but my father spoke before I could. "Get out," he said quietly. She blinked at him, stunned. "What?" I said, "Get out of this house," he repeated, standing up with effort. "Right now, Valerie." Her tears vanished as fast as they'd appeared. "You're going to believe her over me?" she shouted. "After everything I've done for you? She's manipulating you, Richard." He didn't answer. He just walked to the front door and opened it. "Leave," he said again. His voice was calm, but there was no kindness in it anymore. Valerie's face twisted with anger. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "You're nothing without me." She grabbed her purse and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the picture frames rattled on the wall. For a few seconds, the silence felt deafening. My father stood by the door, breathing heavily. I went to him, but he held up a hand. "I'm fine," he whispered. "I just need a minute." He sat down slowly, covering his face with his hands. I can't believe I didn't see it. All this time, there was nothing I could say that would make it easier. I just sat beside him, letting him have the space he needed. A week later, he called me to tell me he had spoken to a lawyer. He was filing for divorce and had already contacted the police about the missing jewelry and the stolen funds. He sounded exhausted but sure. "I should have listened to you sooner," he said quietly. Not long after, Word spread around town. Valerie's reputation crumbled. People who once praised her started avoiding her. Her real estate business began to fall apart. She lost clients, money, everything she had built on lies. I didn't feel happy, not really. Watching my father's heart break wasn't satisfying, even though justice was finally being done. I felt proud that I had protected him, but deep down, I also felt sad. Betrayal never ends cleanly. It leaves behind pieces that can't be put back together. Months passed, and life slowly began to settle again. I had moved to a new hospital in another town, a smaller one where the days were quieter and the faces were kind. My father helped me buy a small house near a lake. It wasn't fancy, but it felt peaceful, like a place where healing could finally happen. He came to visit often. His health had improved since the divorce. He started gardening again, something he hadn't done in years. We would sit outside on my porch in the evenings, sipping tea while he told stories from before my mother died. For the first time in a long while, he looked like himself again. The sadness was still there, but it wasn't controlling him anymore. Valerie's name came up in the news a few times. The police had found enough evidence to open a case against her for fraud and theft. She tried to fight it, but the proof was clear. Every document, every video clip, every signature showed what she had done. I didn't celebrate it. I just felt done. There was nothing left to say about her. Sometimes at night, I'd walk around my new house and catch myself checking the locks or glancing at the small security camera by the door. That camera, the same kind I'd installed just for safety, had changed everything. It had destroyed a lie that had lasted for years. It had shown me who Valerie truly was, and in a strange way, who I had become through it all. I'd learned that betrayal doesn't always come with loud fights or angry words. Sometimes it hides behind a soft voice, behind smiles that seem kind. It takes time and courage to see the truth, and even longer to heal from it. My father once told me, "Peace doesn't come from forgetting. It comes from knowing you did what was right." I think he was right. I still think about my mother sometimes, wondering what she would have said if she saw how things turned out. Maybe she would have told me to keep fighting for the truth, no matter how painful it gets. Now I finally sleep in peace. The camera caught the truth, but it also caught my freedom.